We've got theist calls lining up now
Awesome.
in the queue. We have calling from Texas is Ashton, pronouns are he, him, saying the miracles in the first century are true and none compare with those of Jesus. I'm a little confused. Ashton, what's going on? You're on with Matt and Paul. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, I guess to clarify, I just want to tackle the objection that I hear a lot that Jesus was just another traveling preacher in the first century, apocalyptic preacher, and that his miracles are just like the other miracles of other rabbis at the time, and that there's
So, so
nothing unique about them.
yeah, so
I don't know if
Ashton,
I'm, yeah.
Ashton, I'm happy for you to do that, but I can tell you that, um, and while I'm reluctant to necessarily speak for Paul, um, I think that Jesus's miracles are absolutely on par with all of the other miracles in that we don't have sufficient evidence to believe that any of them actually occurred. But I'm not and have never made an argument that Jesus's supposed miracles are just like everybody else's and should be dismissed. So you may want to kind of refocus what it is you're defending, because the only thing I care about is, did they actually happen, and do you have sufficient reason to determine that these miracles happened, and do we have sufficient reason to say we understand what the cause of these miracles, that they were necessarily divine or whatever else. So hopefully that helps, but the floor is now yours.
Yeah, okay. I think that's a better summary of the position. Yeah, so basically that we have all these like miracle claims from the first century, not just from Jesus, and so that Jesus was just one among several Jewish rabbis who had a following who attributed like these claims to him. So the difference is, so my, so my argument is that the kind of accounts that we have in the Gospels don't really read like legendary accounts or like hagiographies of different saints and Jewish rabbis. And I think a good example would be like the stories from the Talmud or the Mishnah from Jewish rabbis of the first century. I don't know too many off the top of my head, but I just know that those kinds of stories include a lot of like absurdism, or not so much absurdism, but frivolity. So like there's a lot of miracle accounts you'll hear from the lives of different, I guess, Jewish preachers, which are a lot easier to dismiss than the miracles from Jesus, because they're like, I know in one case there's a story about two rabbis who got into a fight, a drunken brawl. One of them killed the other, and then prayed to God and raised his friend from the dead after he had just killed him. The stories like that, which just seem kind of frivolous. It's like, what's the point of God working a
So,
miracle in this specific case? But
so Ashton,
when
can
yeah,
I interrupt for 1 second? So just happen to have been doing a bunch of research on first century apocalyptic prophets. That's just weirdly, coincidentally, a thing I've been reading up on recently. Now, it
mm,
seems a little bit strange to me. It seems like your argument and Matt's point still very much stands. I don't think this relates to Matt or me at all. But you seem now to be
mm.
arguing that Jesus is very different, but you don't seem to have nailed down what he is different from or who he is different from. And it doesn't seem like, if I asked you for a list of other miracle workers in the first century, that you could give that to me. And it makes me a little bit concerned that you are special pleading Jesus versus these other things when you haven't even really read these other things. Am I correct in that? Like, am I hearing the right? Can you name some of these
Mm.
first century?
Well, so that's actually what I wanted to discuss. Is since I know specifically you have been reading about apocalyptic preachers in the first century, like what
Yeah.
kind of miracle claims are comparable to the kinds that we see in the gospel? Just to get specific, because the one I
Yeah.
know of
I need no.
specifically,
Hang on.
yeah,
I need to interject. I'm
yeah,
gonna. I definitely want Paul's question to get answered, but I want to make sure that we're clear. When you're done talking about this, we still need to go back to present one miracle and how we know it even happened, because the characteristics of the stories and how they may differ are completely irrelevant and useless if we don't have reason to believe that a miracle actually occurred. I'm not.
Mm.
I mean, I feel bad because I'm kind of derailing away from Paul's point, but
No,
we
do it.
still haven't addressed the
Mm.
thing I asked a while ago.
Okay. Yeah, because um, I called in to address the specific objection that the miracle claims in the Gospels aren't unique. But
Okay,
how
let me,
can we
Ashton.
determine whether? Yeah,
Ashton, have Paul or I, either one, made that case?
I did. So Paulogia put out a video about his theory for the origins of Christianity. And he does make a passing reference. I mean, in that video, he says each point can deserve its own chapter in a book, but he does make a passing reference to the fact that Jesus is one of many apocalyptic preachers in the first century who had miracle claims
Right.
attributed to him. So
So
that
what I
specific
claim,
claim,
what just Ashton, to be clear,
yeah,
what I claim is that Jesus's message is very mundane for the first century. His message,
message. Okay.
not the miracle claims. The miracle claims, I'm going to give you 2 sentences on this, and then we will go back to Matt's point because I think it'll wrap it up. Almost
Okay.
everything we know about the first century messiahs comes from Josephus, the historian, and he writes about it entirely from a political point of view. And so he mentions that people believed they did miracles, but Josephus goes into no detail at all because he doesn't believe that they did the miracles. He's just merely saying he drew this large crowd because he was known as a miracle worker, which is actually, even if you want to take the interpolation, that's the testimonium flavonium, that's really all he says about Jesus too, is that he was known as a miracle worker. So in that way, he absolutely, was. So I would encourage you, if you care about this, I've never made this argument about miracles. Matt's never made this. So if you're talking to someone, you need to go and research some of those other things. But let's talk about testimony. Let's talk about how we know Jesus did a
Okay.
miracle. Fire at us what the
Sure.
best one. How we know. Let's pretend none of the rest of those comparisons were happening. Get us.
Okay. The best one. So, best one. Best one.
Best evidenced.
So that's, yeah. So there's a lot of ways I can go with this. So I'm guess healing the leper. I'll just go with that one because I know he heals a leper outside, I believe, the city of Jerusalem, and then he's forced to quarantine afterwards after getting in contact with him. I think that is good evidence because there's many eyewitnesses involved. The fact that it is a major point in Jesus' mission, like why he tells the leper to be quiet, why he's sort of a little more low key about doing miracles afterwards, is because he doesn't want to attract the wrong kind of attention. So I think
What makes
that,
you
I guess,
think
is a
there are
good place to start.
what makes you think that there are eyewitnesses?
So, so are you arguing from like a mythicist point of view that
No,
all these stories are
No.
contrived, or like this one specifically?
Ashton, a question isn't an
Yeah.
argument.
Yes.
All he
But
asked
I
was
want to
what makes
understand
you,
like the
what makes,
motivation
no, he's
behind.
asking you what makes you think there were eyewitnesses. All you have to do is say, I'm convinced
Okay.
there are eyewitnesses because. It doesn't matter if Paul's a
Yeah.
mythicist or I am or what position we have on any of this. The only thing that
So I
matters is
think,
what
yeah,
makes you convinced there's an eyewitness.
I'm convinced it was an eyewitness account because of the number of people involved. Oh, so no, eyewitness, I would say it's not I don't think there's sufficient evidence to believe it's a direct eyewitness account, but I think there's sufficient evidence to say that the tale derives from eyewitness accounts, that it was initially preserved either in oral tradition and then
Okay.
recorded later in the Gospel of Matthew.
We need to pause for a second.
So,
Which account of healing a leper are you talking about? Are you talking about the one at the beginning, Matthew 8?
Matthew 8.
Matthew 8, starting with verse
Please
1, when
point
he
up the
come down
reference.
from the mountain, great multitudes followed him, and behold, there came a leper and worshiped him, saying, Lord, if thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. And Jesus put forth his hand and touched him, saying, I will, be thou clean. And
Yes,
immediately his leprosy
that's
was
it.
cleansed. And Jesus said unto him, See thou tell no man, but go thy way, show thyself to the priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded for testimony unto them.
Yeah. So
Okay, so this is
that.
4 verses at the beginning of Matthew chapter 8. And the verses say that Jesus was there with great multitudes. Where's the evidence
Hmm.
that any sentence in these first 4 verses is true?
So I would say the evidence would be in the previous chapter. He gives the Sermon on the Mount, and given the geographic evidence, given the
Hang on.
corroborating. Yeah.
What geographic evidence? Why does what he supposedly said in the previous chapter matter for this? And what geographic evidence are you going to give to verify these 4 verses? I mean, this
So
I promise I'm not just trying to be a dick, but we're looking for evidence that confirms the claims. This passage in the Bible makes claims. It claims that Jesus came down
mm,
from the mountain with multitudes following him, was approached by a leper who asked to be healed, and Jesus healed him. Outside of this passage, which is the claim, what evidence do you have that any of those claims in that passage are actually correct?
so what evidence do I have that any of those claims? So that means just him coming down the mountain and that
Yes.
multitudes were following him, right?
Mhm.
So I
Sure.
would say that it's the genre. The genre is biography, and like most of what we know about history comes from written
Okay.
testimony
I
from biographies. Like,
reject your claim. I reject your claim that this is the genre of biography, or that even if it were the genre of biography, that it means things are true. Is it possible to have a biography where statements in it are not true?
yes.
Okay. Then how do you tell, if you're reading a biography, whether a statement is true?
So I mean that goes more into like historiography. I would say in this case, you can't know like absolutely beyond all reasonable doubt that it is true, but you can determine at least that it's reasonable to conclude that it's true. Like it's reasonable to say
What
that
makes it
Jesus
what
was a
makes it
traveling itinerant
reasonable?
preacher.
What makes it reasonable to conclude that Jesus could heal someone's leprosy?
I would say it's reasonable in this specific instance. I would say everything surrounding this story is reasonable. So to embellish it to like such a hyperbolic degree to like not only attribute a miracle to Jesus, but to flesh out an entire backstory behind this leper, what he went through, and this whole ordeal, the politics involved, everything like that, reads more like
Hang
a
on.
novel, modern novel, than it does
There
like an ancient biography. But yes, hello.
I'm already exhausted, Ashton, because first of all, this passage doesn't tell you anything about a backstory of a leper or what this individual went through or any of that stuff. So you just basically invented that out of whole cloth.
So
But
I'm talking about. Wait,
even if we had an entire chapter about the leper's miserable life, and then it was followed by these 4 verses that said Jesus healed him, that wouldn't mean that Jesus healed him, would it?
so maybe there's multiple times Jesus hears a
That was a
leper,
yes
but
or
I'm
no
thinking of this.
question. Okay. I don't care about the
Yeah.
distractions, Ashton. This is about epistemology, about how do you know that
Mm.
a claim is true? And so in Matthew 8, verse 3, it says, Jesus put forth his hand and touched him, saying, I will, be thou clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. What evidence do you have that that sentence accurately describes a real event that took place?
I would say the evidence I have is the other corroborating accounts in the other Gospels. If not in Matthew 8, I know in other Gospels, other places, the leper
Why?
goes, he gets cleansed,
Let's say
attributes
there
the
are
miracle to Jesus.
23.
Jesus
Let's
forced
say
the
there are
quarantine.
23. Let's say there are 23 gospels that all claim Jesus healed a leper.
Yeah.
Does that mean that Jesus healed a leper? That's just 23
I would say
claims. It's not
I would say that
the plural of anecdote is not data. It doesn't matter if 1 million people make the same claim. That's not 1 million quantitatively evidence that means we are reasonably warranted in believing that claim. And in your case,
so
you don't
yeah.
have that. What you have are multiple anonymous accounts that you cannot source and cannot investigate. And the truth is, you're reading Matthew chapter 8, the first 4 verses, and you are just saying, I believe this. But you don't have any evidence. There's no empirical evidence for any of this. There is just a bunch of stories, and you believe the stories.
So I'm trying to make the argument from undesigned coincidences that there's other accounts that fill in the gaps of this detail, and they read more like truthful testimony than contrived narrative.
I'm going to stop because you're ignoring me. Go ahead.
Ashton.
Yeah.
So yeah, you did ignore completely everything Matt said, but also just the argument you're giving doesn't work. You can't have corroboration when there's collusion. And you're aware that, so this is first told in Mark chapter 1, verses 40 to 45-ish. And Matthew picks it up. And you know that Matthew and Luke both pick this up. And you know that they both pick it up and that they copy, 90% of Mark has been copied into Matthew and Luke. We call that collusion, right? Because they've literally, that's their source. They copied it word for word in the Greek. So you cannot say that someone who copied my homework is corroboration of my homework. That's not how corroboration works. So I know that's a huge side tangent, but you're also just like, you're not thinking this through. These are not corroborating sources.
So I was trying to answer Matt's question that like, what empirical evidence or data do we have to confirm any of what is in Matthew, other than the fact that they're just stories?
Even if you had Matt's point is excellent, was that even if you had 20 people corroborating, that would still be testimony, and that's a whole category of evidence that isn't going to work here. But you don't even have that, is I guess my weird side thing that I shouldn't have interjected, but you don't even have that.
You say there's no corroboration, there's collusion because 90% is copied from Mark.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the unique elements in the other gospels.
No.
That fill in the gaps.
It's called verisimilitude. It's like you're adding details to the story, because the best way to tell a lie and have someone believe the lie is to include details that seem true, that you can literally make the argument you're just making. Well, yeah, why would I lie about going to 7-Eleven? And I went to 7-Eleven and I described which aisle the soda is in, and I got all that, and then there was a dragon in the corner. Well, I don't believe you're talking about the dragon, but I knew exactly where the soda was, so how do you not believe where the dragon was? Like, you understand how ridiculous that sounds from our side of things.
Yeah, and I think where the disconnect is I just
it
I guess
really
it's a
rings
whole
true
other
for
conversation too. I would say the reason it rings true is not the I can't even say verisimilitude aspect. Is like when you made a comparison to like a dragon in the corner. To me, that includes like an element of like frivolity or like absurdity.
Do you understand,
going back to like the original point,
that we think the healing is a frivolity?
Yes.
The healing itself is a frivolity, and so where I would disagree is like it's a core aspect of the story. It's not so like to go back to the example
dragon was a core aspect.
The dragon breathing fire is a core aspect of the story.
Well, I mean, if the story is I went to 7-Eleven, I came home, then the dragon detail is
okay. Ashton, if you're not even going to try, I don't know what to do. we're trying to get
Okay,
to
well, I'll
there.
I'll I'll roll with it.
Stop
Like,
talking for a second. The story about Jesus healing a leper exists in all three synoptic gospels. It's the beginning of Matthew, the beginning of Mark, and Luke chapter 5. And it is virtually the same and virtually word for word in all of those. Doesn't give the backstory, whatever else. But there are three gospels. You don't know who the author of any of those gospels are, do you?
um, I I think it's
Oh,
reasonable to conclude that the authors of those gospels are the traditional authors that have been attributed to them. Like,
okay. Then
I
then
don't see
you
any
are
reason to
then you
doubt
are in
the
then
traditional
you are in
authorship.
complete conflict with the overwhelming majority of New Testament scholars, because Matthew, Mark, and Luke are not signed gospels. The names attributed to them are a matter of tradition that is not accepted necessarily by New Testament scholars. So we don't have any reason to believe that these were actually written by eyewitnesses for many reasons, including the fact that eyewitnesses wouldn't have needed to copy off of each other or off of a shared source, whether it be the signed gospels or Q or whatever else. We don't know. So the reality is nobody knows who the author of Matthew, Mark, or Luke are. And even if the names attributed to them represent the actual people who wrote them, that doesn't in any way mean that what they wrote is true. The consistency across there, especially when they're going word for word, is better explained by copying than by, oh, they all word for word said the same thing because it's true. Or maybe they had conversations, or maybe the oral tradition that they were running with, or the other text that they were looking at, maybe those things were in agreement. But all of that is separate to whether or not the story is true. When the Elvis biographies include Elvis's proposed abduction by aliens, if that's in 7 different Elvis books, that does not mean that we have 7 different sources attesting to the truth that Elvis was abducted by aliens. It means we have 7 different stories, 7 different sources that are telling the same story. And the truth of the story isn't in any way impacted by the number of books that tell it, how many people believe it, how strongly they believe it, whether they're willing to die for it. None of that tells us whether or not the story is true. And so if you're going to look at the rest of the context in the gospels to try to support this, you don't just get to assume, well, healing someone of leprosy, that's just part of the story. That's the miracle that we're actually trying to confirm. What about when Jesus curses a fig tree? um, so the biblical story has Jesus coming across a fig tree that is not in season, doesn't have leaves, and when he doesn't find a fig on it, he curses it. What kind of all-knowing God, all-powerful being can look at a tree that isn't bearing fruit when it's not supposed to be bearing fruit and curse it? I would say that's a miracle. If I go out and I curse a fig tree, that's not going to stop it from bearing fruit. It's not going to dry it up or anything. I would say that Jesus cursing the fig tree is also a miraculous claim, and it's a particularly stupid one, and it's also one that doesn't have any evidence that it happened. So getting back to the leper, we have 3 stories: Matthew 8, 1 through 4, Mark 1, 40 through 45, and Luke 5, like, I don't know, in the middle, 12 or something like that. Um, and all 3 of those stories tell about Jesus healing a leper. I know the stories are there, and I know you think these were written by eyewitnesses or someone who knew an eyewitness or something like that. I don't think they were written by eyewitnesses, but I'll just say, even if they were written by people who claimed to be eyewitnesses, that would not convince me that Jesus actually healed a leper. If Jesus did in fact heal a leper, why isn't there better evidence than there are stories that sync up?
Well, I would say there isn't better evidence because it was the first century and it was before like better forms of record keeping were available. So all people
I'm
had
sorry.
were,
Was Jesus God?
yeah.
Does God have, like, is he nearly all powerful?
Yes.
Why can't God provide all of us right now rock solid evidence that Jesus healed a leper? Why do you have to make an excuse that this happened back in the first century when our record keeping wasn't as good? Why wouldn't God do it now? Why wouldn't God confirm it now? Why wouldn't God give us all evidence right now so that you didn't have to come in and look like you were just trying to advocate for a story that is preposterous? Is God punking you?
I would say that, well, I would say that miracles, there's many instances of miracles that are way better documented that happen today as well.
Cool. Give me one.
Um, so the case of Margaret Paris, no, sorry, Maurice Moreau. That's it, Maurice Moreau. There's a 60-minute documentary about how she was born. I don't know if she was born with a congenital defect, but she had some debilitating disease that left her handicapped. And only after visiting Our Lady of Lourdes and then having a religious
Our Lady
experience
of Lourdes?
was she. I think she went to the Lourdes shrine in France,
You
and
mean
then
Lord?
afterwards she had a religious experience and was healed and didn't need her brace anymore.
Matt's looking that
So
one up.
I know that one off the top of my head because there was a 60-minute special
That's
documentary
when I
on it.
when I
And it's a
Google that
medically
name,
documented.
I get a politician. I don't know who you get, Matt, but
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm
let
not
me
getting.
60 minutes.
But in any case,
60. Maybe I'm misremembering the
in
name.
any case, in any case, if someone went to Lord and prayed for a miracle and got healed, what's the evidence that they were actually sick, actually got healed, and how do you show that that healing was tied to God?
So how do you show that healing is tied to God? I would say if in that case it's reasonable to conclude that God was involved and because of the religious context of the healing,
No,
and because there's no
no,
other medically.
no. Sorry, you don't get to pretend like you know everything about the universe and can rule out every naturalistic explanation and say, therefore, because it's in a religious context or because there's a Christophany, therefore that means that God did it. That's not how we establish causality. I'm wondering if you're talking about Sister
Well,
Bernadette
I agree
Moreau.
that correlation doesn't equate to causality, but I would say it's reasonable to assume, let's say, like you find a burglar in someone's home, man is dead on the floor, he has a smoking gun in his hand. You can't, like, in that instance, conclude that he did it. Maybe he burglarized the home, found the murder weapon, and picked it up when he was discovered by police. That's, I mean, also a possibility, but I would say an incredibly unlikely one when there's
See,
more self-evident.
every single thing that you listed as a possibility in that scenario is entirely naturalistic and is something for which we have mountains of evidence actually occurring. We know all about guns, we know how they're used, we all know all about murderers, we know all about burglars. You are appealing to a non-naturalistic explanation for which there isn't sufficient evidence and trying to put that. Why is it that when we talk about can you demonstrate that Jesus healed a leper? We get nothing. And now that you're talking about maybe Sister Bernadette at Lourdes,
Oh,
despite the
Bernadette,
fact
that's
that,
it.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I found it. It's clear that you're
I was
advocating for
completely
Catholic
misremembering the
stuff
name.
because the Catholic Church finds miracles all the time and claims they're scientifically verifiable when nobody in science has ever demonstrated or acknowledged the demonstration of any miracle. Otherwise, they'd be getting a Nobel Prize for confirming a miracle. And then when we talk about reasonableness, you give an example that is entirely naturalistic and you try to use that to say that your non-naturalistic explanation for this other thing is reasonable. That's not how reasonableness works. If you want to demonstrate that God is a reasonable, candidate explanation for anything, you need to demonstrate either directly that God exists, that he can and does interact with reality, and that he should be listed as a candidate explanation. You don't just get to say, as far as I know, it's scientifically impossible, and because this took place in a religious context, therefore it's reasonable to conclude God. That is probably, while I appreciated that it's a sincere and much more consistent attempt than most other people, it's just a patently absurd epistemology, and it's fallacious to argue that because science doesn't think something is possible, or because I don't think something is scientifically possible, or because I don't think something is naturalistically possible, therefore it's reasonable for me to conclude that a supernatural thing did it. That is fallacious. That is an argument from
Okay.
personal incredulity.
So I'm actually satisfied with that. I'm satisfied with your summary. Only thing I would say is I just don't think that's fallacious. To me, that's just reasonable.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, I
but
guess
it
I'll
is
just have to agree to
demonstrably
disagree. But
fallacious.
yeah.
It is fallacious to say that because I can't think of a natural explanation, I am warranted in accepting a supernatural one. That is literally a fallacy. The fact that you don't think so, I'm going to say
The
that's a defensive
fallacy of incredulity, right?
personal incredulity that something is X because you can't
Personal
imagine it
incredulity.
being otherwise, or you can't accept it. It is a version of an argument from ignorance or an appeal to ignorance fallacy, because in an argument from ignorance fallacy, you're saying X is true until somebody proves me wrong. And what you're saying is it's reasonable for me to conclude God because there isn't an available alternative explanation. It is functionally, although not logically, identical in structure to an argument from ignorance fallacy.
Um, so I don't think it's so you say it's functionally the same, but it's not identical to logical.
Which
It's
is
an
why I
argument
said
from
argument from personal incredulity,
ignorance.
and it's a variety of
Yeah,
argument from ignorance.
it's a variety of arguments. So I don't think it's an argument from ignorance because it's an argument from
No, you're
knowledge. Like
wrong.
if we know how
And
science and the
you can,
natural world
no,
works, then
no, we don't.
mm,
You don't know what is or isn't possible. You only know what science has demonstrated up to this moment, and you probably don't even know that. When cancers go into remission and nobody knows why, you could claim every one of them as a miracle for God, and nobody would ever be able to prove you wrong because your model is unfalsifiable and untestable, which means it is unreasonable to accept it. You are wrong about whether or not it's a fallacy. You are wrong about what is reasonable.
so if I don't know what's possible about the world, that science can't tell me what's possible and what's impossible, then
Okay.
how can we say that any of the miracle claims in the Gospels are impossible?
We don't.
Um,
We don't. And I think you'll find that neither
okay.
Paul nor myself at any point in this conversation said those things are impossible. All we did was ask for what is the evidence to believe that they actually occurred. You haven't, you not only have no way of demonstrating that they occurred, you have no demonstration that they are possible. It's not our job to prove they're impossible. It's your job to prove that they are possible and that they did happen, which you did not do. And now you're falling back on this
So,
this pretend scenario of, well, we can't say they're impossible. Cool. I agree. We can't say they're impossible. Now, what do you got? What do you got after that?
so you can't say that it's impossible. Um, I would just say that since I would say that not only is it not impossible, I would say that it is a possibility as well,
Cool.
given
Cool,
yeah.
Ashton. Let's say cool. It's possible. Possible. When it comes to someone telling you a story, has anyone ever told you a story and they were lying?
Yes, I mean people lie all the time.
Okay. Has anyone ever told you a story that they believed to be true but they were mistaken?
Yes,
Okay. Those things you agree happen some percentage of the time that's non-trivial, right? Some non-trivial amount of time. So
yes.
we've got stories. So even if we acknowledge, hey, miracles happen all the time, or not all the time, but they happen some of the time, and it was possible Jesus was doing this stuff. When you're coming to us with a story, and you've acknowledged that stories are frequently lies, and stories are frequently told by people who are mistaken, sincerely mistaken. So, from my
Mhm.
perspective, if I'm looking at this story and saying, boy, that sure seems less likely than someone's lying, and less likely that they were sincerely mistaken. And if you combine those two possibilities, man, this testimony alone for this miracle claim, I don't see how that should ever rise to me, even if I'm putting it in the category of possible. Like when I was a Christian, I doubted people's miracle claims all the time because it's like, I think you might be mistaken about that. Like we don't have to go to the point of saying that this was impossible for us to say the evidence you're bringing to us, because it's just a story. I've got to, if just statistically, I got to put into that category of mistaken or lying, right? Like, am I unreasonable about
Mm.
that epistemology?
Well, you said frequently people are mistaken or lying when giving testimony. Well, before you said it was non-trivial. It's like a non-trivial amount of time people are
Yeah,
mistaken or
but
lying when
yeah,
giving testimony. And so in this case, I would say that we could at least rule out the possibility that they were mistaken. I mean, if we grant everything in the story, the possibility that the people involved, the
no, because
leper himself,
because
the
as Matt
people who
said,
evaluated him,
we don't
were
know
just
who
mistaken that he was
wrote this
healed.
down, right? But hold on, we don't know who
Yeah.
wrote this down, so we have no
Well,
idea
I'll
if this
grant
is a
that
fifth
assumption, but
hand.
sure.
We don't know if this is a
Yeah.
fifth hand story, and so you can't tell me that the person who wrote this down has some kind of special way of knowing that this wasn't a sincerely mistaken person that spread this story to them. And certainly, like you're now talking about Luke and Mark, who you would agree were not witnesses, right? They were like, even if I grant you all that stuff, Luke got the story from Paul, who got it from who knows who, and Mark got it from Peter. So these are definitely not direct reports.
Hmm.
So we're this whole like sincerely mistaken. Just I'm asking about the epistemology. Do you understand that statistically it's less likely to be a miracle than to be mistaken or lying? And tell me if I'm wrong about that. Tell me why I'm wrong.
I would say in isolation, if all we had was the accounts in Matthew, without the surrounding gospel context, just some preacher in first century
No,
to heal
we're
a
talking
leper.
about
Great. I don't
they're talking about a whole. No, we're talking about the category of stories. Just category of stories.
just a category stories.
Any miracle story, any story with a miracle in
Um,
it. For example, I'm assuming you don't think that Alexander the Great was the son of goddess Artemis, right? You don't think
yeah.
that Alexander the Great was the okay. In his biographies, it says that he is the son of goddess Artemis.
Hmm.
So
So
that's a story with a miracle in it, right? So, but you I assume are sitting there thinking, well, sometimes people lie and sometimes they're mistaken.
okay, good. I mean, this is like where I was hoping to get to in the point of this call. So I'm glad we got here. So, why I just don't think that's a fair comparison because of just
Okay, so
the
you're
amount
special
of
pleading. You're just to be clear, you're special pleading
special
your
pleading.
category of miracle story. You're not answering my question about you're refusing to answer my question
Okay,
about
so
general
let's
miracle
circle back. Yeah,
stories.
so the question about
General.
stories in general, how can we verify? So the question is, how can we verify the accounts in stories in general? The account from just a category of
No,
stories. And I
no.
think as a
The question is, in any story with a miracle in it, are we not sane in thinking that it's more likely to be a lie or a mistake? Forget it, just in general.
Isn't a
in
miracle by
general,
definition, isn't a miracle by definition improbable and
mm,
therefore less likely than a claim of a miracle that isn't true?
I would say yes, because it's by nature miraculous, so it's improbable. That's what a
So
miracle is, I
given
would
that the
say.
default position for a miracle claim would be to lean towards it's unlikely or less likely than it actually occurred, then clearly we need an evidentiary warrant to meet the burden of proof that shows us that a particular miracle claim is probable.
Mhm. I
Okay.
mean, sure.
And the category
So
of testimony and the category of testimony or stories can't overcome that burden just by the nature of it. Like, I don't, you're special pleading yours, but do you understand where we're walking to? From our perspective, just this category of it's a story has this built-in flaw that can't be overcome by you or anyone else.
okay, I follow that. So there must be a different kind of evidence other than testimony if it's less likely to be a possibility that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
So do you have anything other than the testimony in Matthew, Mark, and Luke of this story, which is copied verbatim, which may actually, in fact, be one instance just copied 3 times, but even, we'll just assume it's 3 separate ones that happen to use the exact same words. That's all testimony. Do you have anything beyond the testimony is the question that we had a while ago.
yeah, so I would say, um, I would say just the type of testimony involved.
No,
I would say is different from the kind of
Ashton,
testimony we get.
Ashton, we should stop. When the question is, do you have
Okay.
anything other than testimony? And your answer is
Do you
yes,
have
the
anything?
type
So
of
I
testimony.
brought up.
Why are you talking over me? I paused because I'm trying to save you from embarrassing yourself. When you're asked if you have something other than testimony and you say yes, and the thing that you give that's other than testimony is the type of testimony, you're done.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, in this specific instance, all we have is testimony.
Okay.
But I would say that we also have, like I mentioned, other miracle claims to suggest that our understanding of the world,
Here's the thing.
especially regarding like extraordinary claims, is limited.
Does the number of miracle claims make any particular miracle claim more or less likely?
I would say it makes it more likely if it's something that
Why?
we observe regularly.
Why?
Well, because if
So
it's
when somebody lies habitually, does that make any of their lies more or less likely to be true?
less likely.
Okay. So for a lie, you go with less likely. But for a miracle, which you've already
Mm.
acknowledged is less probable than its actual, that a lie is more probable than its actual occurrence, all of a sudden you switch to saying it increases it. You have a completely inconsistent epistemological foundation here where you are treating claims that you accept different from claims that you don't accept.
So well, the point I was making there, you asked like if does more miracle claims make it more or less likely that the miracle claims in the gospel are true? I would say like beyond just claims, like if we grant that those claims are true, like let's say we do observe miracles, that makes the claims in the gospel less extraordinary and therefore more likely.
Does the
That was
claim
the
that
direction I was
Alexander
going.
the Great does the claim that Alexander the Great is the son of the goddess Artemis make Jesus more likely to be the son of God?
No,
Is it
Why
more
not?
but
likely?
the
Is it,
claim that
is it,
Jesus
Sorry,
healed a
go ahead.
leper. Yeah. Oh, you want me to go ahead? Okay. I was just going to say, like, the claim that Jesus healed a leper, that a man was healed miraculously of his leprosy after a religious experience, is less likely in the context of Sister Bernadette being healed from Our Lady of Lourdes. That's the claim I'm making. When it comes
We're
to
try-
is Alexander
we're
the
trying to
Great the
demonstrate
son?
they're like
Hmm?
they are. You think that they're not alike, but they are identically alike. That both. I gave you 2 example of Son of Divinity miracles, and you and you said
Hmm.
epistemologically that they don't affect each other, and now you're giving healing miracles, and you think that they're different, and you think that it somehow is a different category. So this is what's frustrating me and Matt, is that you don't seem to
Hmm.
be coming along with us on the journey and taking a step back outside of yourself and the thing you wanted to talk about and see how an outsider sees it. You need to have an outsider test to be able to
to
take
quote
yourself out
John
of what
Locke.
you.
So I was just
The
like
thing, the thing that
the
no,
miracle of
stop,
Jesus being the Son
stop,
of
No,
God.
sorry,
stop,
Yeah.
stop.
Matt's turn now.
The thing that's frustrating is that I spent some time here outlining an actual serious flaw in your epistemology, and your response was to say, the point I was trying to make was, I've reached my limit for people ignoring whatever the fuck I say just so they can say the next thing in their script or preference. You are welcome to call back another time, Ashton. You are welcome to think about this and come back with better evidence, but you have exhausted me with your inability to acknowledge the shit that I'm saying while you go on with your script for the day. So thanks.
All right. Goodbye.
And my apologies, Matt, if I enabled that in some way. But.
No. We were both trying for the same thing, but I mean, it's frustrating to be sitting here and getting honest. I'll talk to Ashton anytime, but I mean, it's 45 minutes we've been on the phone, and like we said, we'll go on for a long time as long as somebody's honestly answering. And Ashton, while it was sometimes difficult prying him in particular directions, would at least come far enough to where we were able to show, I think, the difference between the sort of epistemological thinking that you and I are going to do on hearing a miracle claim and what Ashton's doing on hearing a miracle claim. And there's a number of blatant inconsistencies in his model, not the least of which is taking the ones from the Bible and treating them as a different category to other claims, and taking claims that aren't in the Bible but are consistent with his biblical model of some sister getting healed at the, Our Lady of Lourdes or whatever, and that being presented as if it adds affirmation. It reminds me very much of something that literally happened in my most recent debate, which I did on Good Friday, with Dan Christopoulos in Tampa, Florida, because during the Q&A session, he brought up the miracle of Marlene Klebs or Klebs, I don't know, saying that this miracle, because it was accompanied by a Christophany, an apparent appearance of Christ, that it actually added credibility to the claim of a resurrection, which is just monumentally flawed epistemology. Two completely separate claims that are tied in a conclusion you've reached about them does not mean that one is supportive of the other, especially when you have no reason to think that either of them are true. And when I was presented the PDF files that this Marlene story was based on, and went and did research, it turns out that story is ridiculous for any reasonable person to think that Marlene actually was miraculously healed. But even if you manage to stretch to the point where you think the healing was miraculous, there is zero evidence to support it, and no evidence anywhere in the universe that we can tell that says she was healed because of God. And it certainly doesn't mean that Marlene is confirmation of the resurrection. It is a bizarre set of apologetics. And by the way, this isn't me picking on Than, although, I will. I mean, Than knows what I think, but also the other individuals who were there. I had a long conversation with the guy that put this together, and they are trying to create, I kid you not, I'm not going to give too many details of the discussion because we'll see what happens, but they as a team are trying to create an epistemological foundation that demonstrates that the power of a Christophany, of an apparent appearance of Christ, so that if there's a healing that is accompanied by a claim of a Christophany, they lend more credence to that. Just right out of the gate. If you're healed and you say that it was accompanied by some experience of God, that automatically for them gives that claim more credence.
Wow.
This is a raw demonstration of an open bias, that because you're already convinced of the claims of the resurrection and convinced of the claims of Jesus, that when someone cites that for something else which has not been demonstrated, that becomes more plausible. I did an entire video on my channel going through this in detail. It's probably the most research I've done on, I mean, most of the videos I spend a lot of time thinking about and having conversations with myself and other people. And I get my thoughts kind of together, and I'm like, boom, I've got a list of probably 25 topics where it's like, I'm still thinking. And then boom, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to record something between 8 and 25 to 30 minutes. Almost all of mine are done with no cuts, facing the camera like this. They are with scattered notes, because I sit around thinking about these things, obsessing about them until I'm just comfortable talking about them off the top of my head. This is one that I didn't do like that.
You brought
This
the
was-
receipts on this one. I love that video from you. Yeah, you brought it.
And it's kind of sad that, I wish there was a better reason to believe it.